The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Cross Industries as Sophia Chen hurried through the revolving doors. Her heels clicked against the polished surface, echoing in the vast lobby adorned with modern art and towering glass walls. The scent of expensive coffee mixed with the subtle fragrance of fresh orchids placed strategically throughout the space. At 26, Sophia had worked as an executive assistant for 3 years, but today felt different. Today, the weight of countless small humiliations pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Nathan Cross stood behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 40th floor, surveying the city below like a king overlooking his kingdom. At 32, he commanded Cross Industries with an iron fist, his steel-gray eyes missing nothing. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly across his broad shoulders, and his dark hair was styled with precision. Everything about Nathan spoke of control, power, and an untouchable distance that made even his closest business associates feel like they were walking on thin ice. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual for Sophia. She balanced a stack of reports in one hand and Nathan's morning coffee in the other. The black liquid steamed through the lid, and she wondered if today would bring another round of his cutting remarks. Her reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a woman with determination in her dark eyes. Her black hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her burgundy blouse pressed to perfection. She had learned to armor herself with professionalism, but lately, even that felt insufficient. The reception area outside Nathan's office buzzed with quiet activity. Emma Rodriguez, her best friend from the marketing department, caught her eye and offered a sympathetic smile. Emma had witnessed many of Nathan's cold interactions with Sophia over the past months. The two women had become closer as they navigated the challenging atmosphere of working under Nathan's demanding leadership. Sophia knocked twice on the heavy oak door before entering Nathan's sanctuary. The office was a study in masculine elegance with dark leather furniture, a massive mahogany desk, and walls lined with awards and photographs of Nathan with world leaders and business moguls. The morning light streaming through the windows created sharp contrasts, much like the man himself. Nathan didn't look up from his computer screen when she entered. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision he applied to everything else in his life. Sophia placed the coffee on his desk and set the reports in the designated area. She had learned his preferences through careful observation. Noting how he liked his coffee black and his reports organized by priority and date. "The Morrison contract needs revision," Nathan said without lifting his eyes from the screen. His voice carried the crisp authority that made junior executives scramble to please him. "The terms in Section 4 are unacceptable. Want it redone." By noon, Sophia felt her stomach tighten. The Morrison contract was a complex document that had taken her team 2 weeks to prepare. Revising it in 4 hours would be nearly impossible, especially considering her other deadlines. "Mr. Cross, the legal team spent significant time on those terms. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting to discuss specific changes." For the first time that morning, Nathan's eyes met hers. The gray depths held no warmth, only the cold calculation she had grown to expect. "Are you questioning my judgment, Miss Chen?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she maintained her composure. "Not at all, sir. I'm simply suggesting that a collaborative approach might yield better results." Nathan leaned back in his leather chair, his gaze never leaving her face. "I don't pay you to suggest approaches. I pay you to execute my decisions. If you find that challenging, perhaps you should consider whether this position is suitable for you." The words struck like physical blows. Sophia had heard similar dismissive comments countless times, but today they seemed to cut deeper. Thought of her student loans, her mother's medical bills, and the professional reputation she had built through years of dedicated work. All of it felt fragile under Nathan's cold scrutiny. "Of course, Mr. Cross. I'll have the revisions ready by noon." Her voice remained steady despite the storm. Brewing inside her, the morning progressed with a series of impossible deadlines and subtle criticisms. During the 10 o'clock board meeting, Nathan corrected her pronunciation of a client's name in front of 12 senior executives. The correction wasn't necessary. Her pronunciation had been correct, but it served to establish the hierarchy in the room. Sophia felt the familiar burn of embarrassment as she saw some board members exchange glances. At 11:30, She delivered the revised Morrison contract to his desk. Nathan flipped through the pages with theatrical slowness, his expression giving nothing away. After several minutes of silence, he set the document down and looked up at her. "This will suffice," he said, as if granting a tremendous favor. Though I noticed the formatting in Section 7 could be improved, Sophia bit back her response. The formatting was identical to the company's standard they had used for years. Instead, she nodded and turned to leave. "Miss Chen," Nathan's voice stopped her at the door. "Bring me a fresh coffee. This one has gone cold." She looked at the cup on his desk. Steam still rose from the surface, indicating it was far from cold. But she nodded and left to fulfill his request, her hand shaking slightly as she closed the door behind her. In the break room, Sophia stood before the expensive coffee machine, her reflection wavering in its polished surface. Emma appeared beside, her concern written across her features. "He's being particularly difficult today," Emma observed, keeping her voice low. "Even James mentioned that Nathan seems more on edge than usual." James Mitchell, Nathan's business partner and one of the few people who could speak freely with him, had indeed noticed the increased tension. The two men had built Cross Industries together, but lately, James worried about his friend's increasingly cold demeanor toward staff, particularly Sophia. Sophia prepared the fresh coffee with mechanical precision, her mind racing. 3 years of her life had been dedicated to this company, to supporting Nathan's vision and helping build his empire. She had worked late nights, sacrificed weekends, and endured countless small cruelties in the name of professionalism. But something inside her had reached its breaking point. The walk back to Nathan's office felt like a march to execution. She carried the coffee with steady hands, but her heart raced with a decision that was forming like a storm on the horizon. Nathan was on the phone when she entered, his voice commanding as he negotiated what sounded like a multi-million-dollar deal. He gestured impatiently for her to set the coffee down and leave. But Sophia found herself frozen in place. The conversation continued around her, Nathan's words flowing with the confidence of a man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. When he finally ended the call, he looked at her with irritation. "Was there something else, Miss Chen?" The question triggered something primal in Sophia. 3 years of accumulated resentment, frustration, and wounded pride crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. She looked at the coffee in her hands, then at Nathan's expectant face, and made a choice that would change both their lives forever, without hesitation. She tilted the cup and poured the hot coffee directly onto his expensive suit. The dark liquid spread across the fabric like spilled ink, and the sound of it hitting his desk echoed in the sudden silence. Nathan's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and something that might have been respect. He stood slowly, coffee dripping from his jacket, his gray eyes locked on hers with an intensity she had never seen before. "I quit," Sophia said, her voice clear and strong. She set the empty cup on his desk with deliberate care and turned toward the door. "No," Nathan's voice stopped her mid-step. "You don't." She turned back to face him, confused by his calm tone. "Excuse me?"
Nathan?
Removed his ruined jacket and set it aside, his white shirt remarkably unscathed. When he looked at her again, something had shifted in his expression. The cold mask had cracked, revealing glimpses of something more complex underneath. "You don't quit, Miss Chen. Not like this." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "You want to leave? Fine, but you'll do it properly." "Yeah, there's nothing proper about the way you treat people." Sophia shot back, her courage bolstered by her decision to leave. "Perhaps not," Nathan admitted, and the concession surprised them both. "But there's something we need to settle first." "What?" Nathan studied her face with the same intensity he applied to his business deals. 1 week, work directly with me. For 1 week. If you can handle that, I'll write you a recommendation that will open any door in this city, and if I can't." A smile played at the corners of his mouth, not the cold, calculated expression she knew, but something more genuine. "Then you'll understand why I am the way I am." Sophia felt the challenge in his words like an electric current. Part of her wanted to walk away immediately, to preserve what remained of her dignity. But another part, the part that had survived. Every test Nathan had thrown at her was intrigued by this unexpected offer. 1 week, she repeated, testing the words. 7 days, work exclusively with me. Handle whatever I throw at you. No complaints, no backing down. His eyes never left hers. Think you can manage that, Miss Chen? The gauntlet was thrown. Sophia looked at this man who had made her life difficult for 3 years, now offering her something between a challenge and an opportunity. She thought of all the times she had bitten her tongue, all the moments she had swallowed her pride, and all the dreams she had deferred while serving his ambition. I accept, she said, extending her hand. Nathan took her hand in his, and for a moment they stood connected in a way that was entirely new. His grip was firm and warm, and she felt something pass between them that had nothing to do with employer and employee dynamics. This changes everything, he warned, his voice lower than before. Good, Sophia replied, meeting his intensity with her own. It was time for a change. As they shook hands in his coffee-stained office, neither could predict that this moment would be the beginning of something that would transform them both. The woman who had thrown coffee at a billionaire and the man who had never backed down from any challenge were about to discover that the most dangerous battles are often fought in the human heart. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting their joined hands in golden light, and for the first time in 3 years, Nathan Cross smiled, genuinely smiled at Sophia Chen. The first day of the challenge began before sunrise. Sophia's phone buzzed at 5 in the morning, Nathan's name flashing across the screen like a warning. His voice was crisp and businesslike when she answered. Meeting room 12. 6 sharp. Bring coffee for 2. The line went dead before she could respond. Sophia stared at her phone in the darkness of her apartment, wondering what she had gotten herself into. The previous day felt like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. But the coffee stain on her blouse hanging in the closet proved it had been real. Cross Industries at dawn was a different creature entirely. The usual bustle of hundreds of employees was replaced by an almost sacred quiet. Security guards nodded as Sophia made her way to the executive floors, her heels echoing in the empty corridors. The building felt like a sleeping giant, all potential energy waiting to be unleashed. Meeting room 12 was a glass-walled conference space on the 38th floor. Nathan was already there when she arrived, standing before a wall of monitors, displaying financial data from markets around the world. He had changed from his usual formal attire into dark jeans and a navy sweater that made him look younger, more approachable, though no less commanding. Tokyo markets are responding to the semiconductor announcement, he said without turning around. Hong Kong will follow within the hour. You have a narrow window to capitalize. Sophia set the coffee on the conference table and moved to stand beside him. The numbers streaming across the screens meant little to her, but she could sense the electricity in Nathan's posture, the predatory focus that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. What do you need me to do? Nathan glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. Learn, watch, understand how real decisions are made. For the next 4 hours, Sophia witnessed Nathan orchestrate a symphony of international business. He spoke with traders in London, manufacturers in Seoul, and government officials in 3 different time zones. His mind worked like a supercomputer, processing vast amounts of information and finding patterns that others missed. She found herself drawn into the rhythm of his decision-making. The calculated risks and split-second judgments that moved millions of dollars across continents. Why are you showing me this? She asked, during a brief pause between calls. Nathan poured himself more coffee, his movements deliberate and controlled. Because I want you to understand what you've been part of. Every document you've prepared, every meeting you've scheduled, every detail you've managed, it all leads to moments like this. There was no condescension in his voice, no hint of the cold superiority she had grown accustomed to. Instead, she heard something that sounded almost like respect. The morning gave way to afternoon, and the building filled with the usual army of employees. But Nathan kept Sophia close, involving her in decisions that normally would have been far above her pay grade. She reviewed acquisition targets, analyzed market reports, and even contributed insights that made him pause and reconsider. His positions? You have good instincts, he admitted, as they reviewed a potential partnership with a European firm. Your analysis of their quarterly reports caught something my entire financial team missed. Sophia felt a flush of pride that she tried to suppress. This was still the man who had made her professional life difficult for 3 years. One day of respectful treatment didn't erase the past. The second day brought a crisis that tested both of them. A major client threatened to pull a contract worth $50 million over a misunderstanding about delivery timelines. Nathan's usual response would have been to let his legal team handle the situation, but instead asked Sophia to join him in crafting a personal response. They worked late into the evening, ordering dinner to the office and spreading documents. Across the conference table, as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, Sophia found herself seeing Nathan in a different light. Without the formal barrier of his executive persona, he was still intense and demanding, but also surprisingly collaborative. "Tell me what you think," he said, sliding a draft letter across the table. "Not what you think I want to hear, what you actually think." Sophia read the document carefully, noting the legal language and formal tone. "It's perfectly professional," she said finally, completely cold. "If someone sent this to me, I'd think they didn't really care about fixing the problem." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "What would you do differently?" "Make it personal. Acknowledge that we let them down. Tell them that this matters to you as more than just a business transaction. It's not how I operate. Maybe that's the problem." The words hung between them like a challenge. Sophia expected the familiar flash of anger, the cold dismissal that usually followed any suggestion that Nathan might be wrong about something. Instead, he reached for a pen and began rewriting the letter. The revised version was warmer. It's more human, while still maintaining professional standards. When they sent it at midnight, Sophia watched Nathan's face as he hit the send button. There was vulnerability there, a crack in the armor that usually protected him from the world. "My mother would have liked that approach," he said quietly. Almost to himself, it was the first personal detail Nathan had ever shared with her. Sophia wanted to ask more, but something in his expression warned her not to push. Instead, she gathered her things and prepared to leave. "Sophia." Nathan's voice stopped her at the door. He'd used her first name, she realized. Not Miss Chen, not the formal distance he usually maintained. "Thank you." Ah! The third and fourth days blurred together in a whirlwind of high-stakes meetings and international calls. Nathan continued to include Sophia in decisions that shaped the direction of Cross Industries, and she found herself rising to meet every challenge he presented. More importantly, she began to see glimpses of the man behind the billionaire facade. During a break between meetings, found him standing on the executive balcony, looking out over the city with an expression she couldn't quite read. Ruffled his dark hair, and for a moment he looked almost lonely, despite being surrounded by the empire he had built. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "Regret what? Building all this? The pressure, the isolation, the constant need to be perfect." Nathan was quiet for so long that Sophia wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Every day. But regret doesn't change anything. You make choices, and you live with the consequences." "What?" "Choices." He turned to look at her, and she saw something raw in his gray eyes. "The choice to never let anyone close enough to hurt you. The choice to build walls instead of bridges. It's the choice to be feared rather than loved. Those don't have to be permanent choices, don't they?" Nathan's smile was sad and knowing. "Look at us, Sophia. You've worked for me for 3 years, and it took you dumping coffee on me to have a real conversation. What does that say about the kind of man I've become?" Before she could answer, James Mitchell appeared in the doorway, interrupting the moment. But Sophia carried Nathan's words with her for the rest of the day. Sensing that he had revealed something important about the pain that drove his need for control, the fifth day brought an unexpected test. When Nathan's father called an emergency board meeting, Sophia had heard rumors about the complicated relationship between Nathan and his father, but she had never witnessed it firsthand. Richard Cross was an older version of his son, with the same commanding presence, but a harder edge. That spoke of a different generation's approach to business. "I see you're still playing games with the staff," Richard said, his disapproving gaze moving between Nathan and Sophia during a break in the meeting. "Sophia is one of our most valuable team members," Nathan replied, his voice carefully controlled. "Valuable. Enough to waste board time explaining why you're bringing an assistant to executive meetings?" Sophia felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but before she could excuse herself, Nathan stepped closer to his father. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Sophia has contributed more strategic insight this week than most of our senior executives have in the past year," If you have a problem with my management decisions, we can discuss it privately. The confrontation was brief but intense. Two powerful men locked in a battle of wills that clearly had roots, extending far beyond the current situation. Richard eventually backed down, but not without shooting Sophia a look that promised future trouble. After the meeting, Nathan was quiet and withdrawn. They worked side by side for the rest of the afternoon, but the easy collaboration of the previous days had been replaced by a tension that neither of them addressed directly. "I'm sorry about my father," Nathan said finally as they prepared to leave that evening. "You don't need to apologize for him." "Yes, I do." Nathan stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. He was out of line and he's used to people accepting that behavior because of who he is. I spent most of my childhood thinking that was normal. The admission hung between them. Another piece of the puzzle, that was Nathan Cross. Sophia began to understand that his coldness wasn't born from arrogance, but from a lifetime of learning to protect himself in a world where vulnerability was seen as weakness. The sixth day arrived with an unexpected crisis that would test everything they had built together. A fire at one of their manufacturing facilities threatened not only to shut down production, but also to expose safety violations that could destroy the company's reputation. Nathan received the call at 3 in the morning, and by 4, he and Sophia were in a car racing toward the facility. The scene that greeted them was controlled chaos. Fire trucks lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the building in dramatic colors. The fire was contained, but the damage was extensive. Nathan surveyed the scene with the grim focus of a general assessing a battlefield. "We need damage control," he said, already pulling out his phone. "Media, insurance, regulatory compliance, employee communications. This could sink us if we handle it wrong." For the next 18 hours, they worked without stopping. Sophia coordinated with multiple agencies, while Nathan handled the strategic decisions that would determine the company's survival. They functioned as a team in a way that felt natural and right, anticipating each other's needs and filling gaps without being asked. It was during this crisis that Sophia saw Nathan at his best. He insisted on personally visiting every injured worker in the hospital, even though his lawyers advised against it. He authorized immediate financial support for employees whose homes had been damaged by the smoke. And he stood before the media taking full responsibility for the incident, rather than hiding behind corporate lawyers. "You didn't have to do that," Sophia said as they finally left the hospital after visiting the last injured worker. "Yes, I did." Nathan's voice was tired but firm. "These people trust me with their livelihoods. When something goes wrong, that's on me, not them." As they drove through the early morning darkness, Sophia realized that she was seeing the man Nathan could be when he allowed his better nature to guide his decisions. The crisis had stripped away his usual defenses, revealing someone who cared deeply about the people who worked for him, even if he struggled to show it under normal circumstances. "Why don't you let people see this side of you more often?" she asked. Nathan was quiet for several blocks before answering. "'Cause caring makes you vulnerable. And vulnerable people don't survive in this world." "Maybe they do," Sophia said. Softly, "Maybe they just survive differently." When Nathan finally dropped her off at her apartment as the sun was rising, he caught her hand as she was getting out of the car. The touch was gentle, entirely different from the firm handshake that had sealed their agreement. "Tomorrow is the last day," he said, and she heard something in his voice that might have been regret. "I know. Are you ready for it to be over?" Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing exhaustion and something else, something that made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine or adrenaline. "I don't know," she admitted. Nathan's thumb traced across her knuckles, a gesture so tender that it took her breath away. "Neither do I," as she watched him drive away in the growing light of dawn. Sophia realized that the challenge had changed both of them in ways neither had anticipated. The woman who had thrown coffee at a billionaire was falling for the man behind the mask. And the seventh day would force them both to confront feelings that threatened to reshape everything they thought they knew about themselves. The seventh day dawned gray and heavy, with storm clouds gathering over the city like an omen. Sophia arrived at Cross Industries to find the building unusually quiet. Many employees had been given the day off following the crisis at the manufacturing facility, leaving the executive floors eerily empty. She made her way to Nathan's office, uncertain of what this final day would bring. Nathan was standing by his windows when she entered, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His usually perfect appearance showed signs of strain. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. "You look like you haven't been home," Sophia observed, setting fresh coffee on his desk. "I haven't." Nathan turned from the window, and she was struck by the vulnerability in his expression. "I've been thinking about what happens after today." The weight of his words settled between them. For 6 days, they had worked together as equals, building something that felt more like partnership than employment. The thought of returning to their old dynamic, or worse, of her leaving entirely, felt wrong to both of them. "Nathan," Sophia began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Let me say this first. Before we talk about recommendations or next steps or any of the practical things," he moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "This week has changed something in me. You've changed something in me." Sophia's heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. "The challenge. It was about proving I could handle working with you." "No," Nathan said softly. "The challenge was about me figuring out if I could handle losing you." Before she could respond to this admission, Nathan's assistant knocked on the door. James Mitchell entered, his expression grim and urgent. "We have a problem," James announced, glancing between Nathan and Sophia. "Richard called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. He's bringing a motion of no confidence." Nathan's face went cold, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the ruthless businessman. On what grounds? Reckless decision-making during the factory crisis. Emotional involvement with staff? Failure to maintain professional boundaries. James's eyes flicked to Sophia. "He's using your relationship with Sophia as evidence that you're unfit to lead." The room fell silent except for the sound of rain beginning to patter against the windows. Sophia felt sick, realizing that her week with Nathan had potentially given his father the ammunition he needed to destroy his son's career. "This is my fault," she said, standing to leave. "Should never have accepted the challenge. I'll resign immediately and make it clear that nothing inappropriate happened. Sit down." Nathan's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You're not going anywhere, Nathan. Be reasonable," James interjected. "If you distance yourself from Sophia now, you can probably weather this. Your father doesn't have enough support to actually remove you, but he can make things very difficult," I said. "No." Nathan's tone brooked no argument. "I'm not throwing Sophia under the bus to appease my father's outdated notions about business. Relationships." Sophia looked between the two men, seeing years of friendship and business partnership in James's concerned expression, and something harder, more determined, in Nathan's. She understood that Nathan was about to make a choice that could cost him everything he had built. "What if there was another way?" she asked quietly. Both men turned to look at her. Sophia took a deep breath, her mind working quickly through the possibilities. "Your father is using our working relationship as evidence of poor judgment. But what if it wasn't just a working relationship anymore?" Nathan's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes the best defense is a good offense." So Sophia stood, pacing to the window where the storm was growing stronger. "Your father wants to paint you as someone who can't maintain professional boundaries. But what if the boundary changed legitimately?" James caught on first. "But you're talking about going public with a personal relationship. I'm talking about being honest about what this week has really been about." Sophia turned back to face Nathan, her heart in her throat. "Unless I'm completely wrong about what's been happening between us." Nathan stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him processing the implications of what she was suggesting. Going public with a relationship would protect them both from accusations of impropriety, but it would also make them vulnerable, in ways that Nathan had spent his entire adult life avoiding. "You don't understand what you're asking," Nathan said finally. "My personal life becomes public property. Every relationship I've ever had gets dissected in the media. Every mistake, every private moment, all of it becomes fair game." "I know." Sophia's voice was steady, despite the fear racing through her veins. "I'm asking anyway." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and risk. James quietly excused himself, understanding that this conversation needed to happen privately. When the door closed behind him, Nathan moved to stand directly in front of Sophia. "This isn't just about saving my position," he said, his voice low and intense. "If we do this, there's no going back. No pretending it was just business or just convenient. Are you ready for that?" Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing the man who had shown her glimpses of his true self over the past week. The man who visited injured workers in hospitals and rewrote letters to be more human. The man who had trusted her with his vulnerabilities and fears. "I've been ready since the third day," she admitted. "When you told me about your mother? When you let me see that you're not the cold person you pretend to be?" Nathan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "I haven't been pretending with you, not for days now, and stop pretending with everyone else." The kiss that followed was nothing like the performance at the business dinner. This was real and desperate and full of emotions that neither of them had planned for. Sophia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as 3 years of tension and conflict transformed into something entirely different. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "My father is going to make our lives hell," he warned. "Let him try." Nathan laughed, a sound of pure joy that Sophia had never heard from him before. "God, you're incredible. Do you know that? You're about to take on one of the most powerful men in the country, and you sound like you're looking forward to it." Looking forward to not having to pretend I don't care about you anymore? The admission hung between them, honest and brave. Nathan kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. "I need to tell you something," he said when they separated, "about why I've been so difficult to work with." Sophia settled into the chair across from his desk, knowing instinctively that what he was about to share would explain everything that had happened between them. "My mother died when I was 15, Nathan began, his voice carefully controlled. "Cancer. She fought it for 2 years. I watched her get weaker and smaller until she wasn't the woman who had raised me anymore." He moved to the window, looking out at the storm that was now lashing the building with rain. "She was the only person who ever stood up to my father, the only person who made him show any human emotion. After she died, he became even harder, more ruthless. He told me that caring about people was a weakness that would destroy everything we had built." Sophia felt pieces clicking into place. Nathan's coldness, his difficulty with emotional connections, his fierce protection of the empire his family had created. "For years, I believed him," Nathan continued. "I built walls around myself and convinced myself it was necessary for success. I treated people as resources instead of humans, because that's what I thought strength looked like." "What changed?" Nathan turned back to her, and she saw tears in his eyes that he didn't try to hide. "You did. The way you fought back, the way you challenged me, the way you refused to be diminished by my behavior. You reminded me of her, of the person I used to be before I decided that caring was dangerous." Sophia stood and went to him, taking his hands in hers. "Caring is dangerous, but not caring is worse. I know that now. This week, working with you, seeing how much better everything can be when people actually matter." Nathan squeezed her hands. "I can't go back to being the person I was before." "Good," Sophia said firmly, "because I fell in love with the person you are now." The words surprised them both. They had been dancing around the feelings for days, but hearing them spoken aloud made everything real in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I love you too," Nathan said, and his voice broke slightly on the words. "I love your courage and your intelligence, and the way you make me want to be better than I am." The rain continued to pound against the windows as they held each other, both understanding that they were about to face a battle that would test everything they had discovered about themselves and each other. 2 hours later, they walked into the boardroom together, hand in hand. The assembled board members looked shocked at this unprecedented display of unity, and Richard Cross's face went through several shades of anger before settling on cold fury. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior I was referring to," Richard began, but Nathan cut him off. "There's nothing unprofessional about honest emotions and genuine partnership," Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "Sophia and I have developed a personal relationship that grew out of mutual respect and shared values. If that bothers you, I suggest you examine why you find human connection so threatening." The battle that followed was intense but brief. Nathan presented the board with the results of the past week, the successful crisis management, the innovative solutions Sophia had contributed, the improved employee morale that had resulted from their collaborative approach. He spoke passionately. about the need for businesses to prioritize human values alongside profit margins. When the vote was called, Richard's motion of no confidence failed by a wide margin. The board had seen the results of Nathan's new approach and wanted more of it, not less. As the boardroom emptied, Richard approached his son one last time. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "Business and emotions don't mix, so we'll destroy everything we've built." "Maybe," Nathan replied, his arm around Sophia's waist. "Or maybe it will build something better." Richard left without another word, and Nathan and Sophia were alone in the boardroom where everything had begun. "So," Sophia said, leaning into his embrace, "what happens now?" Nathan smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Now we figure out how to run a company together, how to love each other, how to build something that matters. Think we can handle it?" "I think we can handle anything as long as we're together." 6 months later, Cross Industries had become known not just for its financial success, but for its innovative employee programs and ethical business practices. Nathan and Sophia had married in a small ceremony attended by friends and colleagues who marveled at the transformation in both of them.